The maps of the early 20th century held vast, tantalizing blanks. Patches of terra incognita that whispered promises of adventure, danger, and the thrill of unveiling the world's last secrets. For men of a certain disposition, men like Professor Armitage, these blank spaces were irresistible magnets, drawing them towards the unknown with an almost magnetic force. And nowhere on earth was the pull of the uncharted stronger, more primal, than in the heart of the Amazon basin. They called it the Green Hell. A name whispered in hushed tones by rubber traders and missionaries, a name that clung to the air like the oppressive humidity itself. Even the indigenous tribes, those who had learned to live in uneasy truce with its verdant depths, spoke of it with a mixture of fear and reverence. They knew the jungle held secrets best left undisturbed, powers best left unnamed. But Professor Armitage, a man of science and unwavering ambition, dismissed such notions as superstition, folklore. He believed in the rational mind, in the power of human intellect to illuminate even the darkest corners of the world. He was wrong. I was young then, barely out of university, my head filled with romantic notions of exploration gleaned from adventure novels and tales of intrepid explorers. The Amazon, in my youthful imagination, was a realm of exotic flora and fauna, of undiscovered tribes and lost cities shimmering with gold. I saw myself as a latter-day Livingstone, a scientific pioneer charting new territories for the glory of knowledge and the advancement of mankind. Naivete, it seems, is a potent intoxicant. Professor Armitage, our expedition leader, was a figure of imposing presence. Tall and gaunt, with eyes that burned with an almost unsettling intensity, he possessed an aura of unwavering determination that drew people to him like moths to a flame. He had a distinguished academic career behind him, a reputation for groundbreaking research, and a seemingly inexhaustible well of energy and enthusiasm. He spoke of our expedition as a historic undertaking, a chance to rewrite the maps, to redefine the boundaries of human knowledge. We, his chosen team, were to be the vanguard of this new era of discovery. Our team was a diverse collection of specialists, each hand-picked by the professor for their expertise. There was Du Bois, the botanist, a quiet, meticulous man with an encyclopedic knowledge of plant life. There was Mallory, the cartographer, whose skilled hands could translate the chaotic wilderness into precise lines on a map. There was young Cartwright, eager and bright-eyed, our zoologist, dreaming of cataloging species unknown to science. And then there was myself, Thomas Ashton, the expedition's chronicler, tasked with documenting our journey for posterity. We were, in our own ways, all idealists, all driven by a thirst for something beyond the mundane, the familiar. Our objective, as Professor Armitage articulated it, was ambitious in its scope, yet frustratingly vague in its specifics. We were to penetrate the uncharted territories of the upper Amazon, beyond the furthest reaches of European cartography. We were to survey the land, map the rivers, collect specimens, and document anything of scientific or historical significance. Rumors, whispers carried on the winds of colonial gossip, spoke of ancient ruins hidden deep within the jungle, remnants of civilizations lost to time. Professor Armitage, while outwardly skeptical, was clearly intrigued by these tales. The possibility of uncovering such a lost civilization, of adding a new chapter to human history, was a powerful motivator. We began our journey at a small trading post nestled on the banks of the Rio Negro, the last outpost of civilization before the true wilderness began. The post was a ramshackle collection of wooden buildings, buzzing with activity, traders, missionaries, rubber tappers, and indigenous peoples mingling in a cacophony of languages and smells. The air was thick, heavy, almost viscous with humidity, and the cloying, sweet scent of decaying vegetation hung everywhere, a constant reminder of the jungle's relentless cycle of life and death. We loaded our supplies and equipment into dugout canoes, sturdy vessels carved from single tree trunks, guided by indigenous paddlers hired at the trading post. As we pushed off from the riverbank, leaving the last vestiges of human settlement behind. A profound silence descended upon our party. The sounds of the jungle rushed in to fill the void, a deafening chorus of unseen life, a constant rustling, chirping, buzzing, and croaking that seemed to emanate from every direction, pressing in on us from all sides. It was a symphony of the wild, both beautiful and terrifying, a constant reminder that we were now in a realm not of our making, not of our understanding. The river became our lifeline, our artery into this emerald heart of darkness. Days blurred into weeks as we navigated the labyrinthine waterways, the jungle canopy forming a dense, unbroken ceiling overhead, filtering the sunlight into a perpetual twilight. The heat was relentless, a suffocating blanket that clung to our skin, soaking our clothes with sweat and fostering a constant state of discomfort. Insects were a constant torment, swarming in clouds, biting, stinging, burrowing, a relentless assault on our exposed flesh. Disease, we knew, was an ever-present threat, lurking unseen in the murky water and the humid air, a silent predator waiting for an opportunity to strike. Yet, despite the hardships, despite the constant discomfort and the ever-present sense of unease, there was a strange, undeniable allure to it all. A primal beauty that resonated deep within the soul, a sense of being utterly removed from the civilized world, immersed in the raw, untamed power of nature. The jungle was a force of nature on a scale we had never before witnessed, a force both magnificent and utterly indifferent to our fragile human presence. We were intruders here, trespassers in a realm that had existed for millennia before us, and would endure for millennia after we were gone. We were insignificant, ephemeral, swallowed by the immensity of it all. As we ventured deeper, pushing further into the uncharted territory, the familiar markers of civilization receded, fading into distant memory. The river narrowed, becoming choked with vegetation, the current slowing to a sluggish crawl. The towering trees closed in on either side, their branches intertwining overhead, creating a tunnel of green twilight. The sounds of the jungle intensified, taking on a more ominous, less welcoming tone. The vibrant chorus of life seemed to morph into something darker, more secretive, laced with undertones of warning, of menace. The air itself seemed to grow heavier, pregnant with an unspoken sense of unease, a palpable shift in the atmosphere that prickled the skin and raised the hairs on the back of the neck. It was as if the jungle itself was becoming aware of our presence, resisting our intrusion, pushing back against our advance, whispering warnings in the rustling leaves, the sighing wind, the creaking branches. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly, a creeping unease that insinuated itself into our consciousness like the jungle humidity. A feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes observing our every move. A fleeting glimpse of movement in the periphery of our vision, a shadow flitting between the trees, a ripple in the still water that seemed unnatural, too deliberate. The unsettling silences became more frequent, more prolonged, descending abruptly, silencing the usual jungle chorus with an unnerving suddenness, leaving only a heavy, expectant stillness that felt more ominous than any sound. We tried to rationalize it, to dismiss it as mere fancy, the overactive imaginations of explorers venturing into the unknown. We attributed it to the heightened senses of men in unfamiliar territory, the tricks of light and shadow in the dense undergrowth, the psychological effects of isolation and the constant, oppressive environment. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger, more insistent with each passing day, weaving itself into the very fabric of our expedition, a constant, nagging undercurrent of dread that eroded our morale and frayed our nerves. Then came the sounds, the truly unsettling sounds that defied rational explanation. Not the familiar calls of birds or monkeys, not the rustling of animals in the undergrowth, not the natural sounds of the jungle we had grown accustomed to. These were different, alien, unplaceable. Low, guttural growls that seemed to emanate from the earth itself, vibrations that resonated deep in the chest, stirring a primal unease. High-pitched, chilling cries that echoed through the trees, devoid of any recognizable animalistic quality, sharp and piercing, like shards of ice in the humid air. And sometimes, in the dead of night, when the campfire embers glowed low and shadows danced in the jungle's edge, a sound that was almost human. A whisper, a sigh, a choked sob carried on the wind, just at the edge of hearing, always tantalizingly indistinct, yet undeniably present, a phantom lament that chilled us to the bone. Professor Armitage, ever the pragmatist, the man of science, attempted to provide rational explanations for these unsettling phenomena. He attributed the strange growls to undiscovered species of large jungle cats, the chilling cries to rare and exotic birds, the whispers to the wind playing tricks in the dense foliage, the acoustics of the jungle environment distorting familiar sounds, creating auditory illusions. He urged us to remain focused on our scientific objectives, to not succumb to fear and superstition, to not let our imaginations run wild. He spoke of the importance of objective observation, of rational analysis, of maintaining a scientific detachment in the face of the unknown. But even as he spoke, his voice, usually so firm and unwavering, began to betray him, carrying a subtle tremor, a barely perceptible hint of the unease that was slowly, inexorably consuming us all. I saw it in his eyes too, a flicker of doubt, a shadow of fear that belied his confident pronouncements. Even Professor Armitage, the bastion of reason, was beginning to feel the insidious creep of dread. One morning, Du Bois, our lead botanist, the quiet, meticulous scholar of plant life, vanished. It was just before dawn, the jungle still shrouded in pre-dawn gloom, the air thick with mist and the sounds of nocturnal creatures retreating into their daytime lairs. Du Bois, as was his habit, had risen early to collect botanical specimens, venturing a short distance from camp with his collecting bag and his trusty botanical press. He never returned. The search for Du Bois was a descent into madness in itself. We were already frayed, our nerves stretched taut by the oppressive atmosphere of the jungle and the unsettling sounds that haunted our nights. Du Bois' disappearance shattered the last vestiges of our composure, replacing unease with outright panic. Professor Armitage, despite his outward show of resolve, was visibly shaken. The confident pronouncements of scientific rationality now rang hollow, swallowed by the growing dread that permeated our camp. We organized search parties, of course, driven by a desperate sense of duty and a flickering ember of hope. But the jungle seemed to mock our efforts, to actively conceal any trace of our lost botanist. We beat through the dense undergrowth, hacking at tangled vines and pushing through walls of vegetation, calling Du Bois' name until our voices were raw and hoarse. The jungle echoed back only silence, or the unsettling cries of unseen birds, sounds that now seemed to carry a mocking, sinister quality. Days blurred into a nightmarish cycle of fruitless searching and mounting despair. We found no sign of Du Bois, no trace of his passage, as if he had simply vanished into thin air, absorbed by the insatiable maw of the wilderness. The jungle floor was a deceptive tapestry of fallen leaves and decaying vegetation, concealing any footprints, any broken twigs, any sign of human passage. It was as if the very earth was conspiring to hide the truth of his disappearance. But we did find other things during our desperate search, things that chilled us to the bone and deepened the sense of dread that clung to us like a shroud. We found strange tracks in the mud near the riverbank, tracks that were not quite animal, not quite human, too large, too strangely shaped, hinting at a gait that defied natural locomotion. We found patches of vegetation that seemed inexplicably withered, blackened and lifeless, as if scorched by some unseen fire, radiating a faint, unsettling heat even in the humid jungle air. And once, deep in the undergrowth, Mallory stumbled upon something that silenced even Professor Armitage's forced optimism. It was a clearing, small and circular, hidden amidst a thicket of thorny vines. In the center of the clearing, the ground was bare, devoid of vegetation, the soil a sickly, pale color, almost bone-white. And in the center of this barren patch, arranged in a precise, unervingly geometric pattern, were bones. Not animal bones, we realized with a sickening lurch of recognition, but human bones. Cleanly picked, bleached white by the elements, arranged in a spiral pattern that seemed to writhe and twist in on itself, echoing the unsettling geometries we would later find in the ruins. The discovery of the bones silenced all talk of Du Bois being merely lost, of a simple accident. The unspoken fear that had haunted us since the strange sounds began now solidified into a chilling certainty. Something was wrong here. Terribly, fundamentally wrong. The jungle was not merely indifferent to us, it was actively hostile, concealing something ancient and malevolent, something that had claimed Du Bois and countless others before him. The debate about what to do next became more heated, more desperate. Cartwright and Mallory, their youthful enthusiasm extinguished, their faces pale and drawn, pleaded with Professor Armitage to abandon the expedition, to turn back while we still could, to escape the green hell before it consumed us all. Even I, fueled by a growing sense of terror, added my voice to the chorus of dissent, urging retreat, begging for sanity. But Professor Armitage, his eyes now burning with a feverish intensity that bordered on madness, refused to yield. The discovery of the bones, far from deterring him, seemed to galvanize his resolve, to strengthen his obsession. He dismissed our fears as irrational, as the product of overstressed imaginations. He insisted that Du Bois' disappearance and the unsettling discoveries were merely anomalies, isolated incidents that should not distract us from our scientific objectives. He spoke of the importance of perseverance, of intellectual courage, of the duty of explorers to push beyond the boundaries of the known, regardless of the risks. He seemed utterly deaf to our pleas, blind to the mounting evidence of something terrible lurking in the jungle depths. And then, driven by a force I could not understand, a compulsion that seemed to override all reason and self-preservation, he announced that we would press on. Deeper into the uncharted territory. Towards the source of the strange sounds, towards the heart of the green hell. He spoke of the ruins, of the possibility of uncovering a lost civilization, of the scientific glory that awaited us. He painted a picture of triumph and discovery, a seductive vision that, in our weakened and terrified state, held a perverse kind of appeal. Perhaps, we thought, if we could just find the ruins, if we could just understand the source of the mystery, we could regain control, we could banish the encroaching dread. It was a fool's hope, a desperate gamble, but in our fear-addled minds, it seemed like the only path forward. So we pressed on, deeper into the green abyss, driven by the mad will of Professor Armitage and our own desperate, misguided hope. The journey became a slow, agonizing descent into the heart of darkness. The jungle grew denser, more oppressive, the air heavier, more stagnant. The unsettling sounds intensified, becoming more frequent, more insistent, weaving themselves into a constant, maddening chorus that eroded our sanity. The feeling of being watched intensified, becoming almost palpable, a sense of unseen eyes boring into our backs, scrutinizing our every move. We traveled for days, weeks, time losing all meaning in the oppressive green twilight. Our supplies dwindled, our bodies weakened by hunger, exhaustion, and disease. Our spirits were crushed, our minds haunted by fear and premonition. We were no longer explorers driven by scientific curiosity, we were survivors, clinging to a desperate hope of escape, driven onward by the mad obsession of our leader. And then, just when we had reached the limits of our endurance, when despair threatened to overwhelm us completely, we stumbled upon it. The valley. It was as if the jungle itself had parted to reveal it, a sudden, unexpected clearing in the dense, unbroken canopy. We emerged from the suffocating green tunnel into a bowl of shadow and mist, a hidden valley shrouded in perpetual twilight, perpetually shadowed by towering cliffs that seemed to scrape against the very sky. A cold, unnatural mist clung to the valley floor, swirling and eddying around our feet, chilling us to the bone despite the humid jungle air. The air here was different, thinner, colder, carrying a faint, metallic tang, an almost imperceptible scent of decay and something else, something indefinable, something alien. And there, in the heart of the valley, rising from the mist-shrouded earth, were the ruins. The ruins were not merely old, they were ancient, prehistoric, antediluvian. They predated any civilization known to humankind, any culture recorded in the annals of history. They were a testament to a forgotten age, a silent echo of a world that existed before our own, a world governed by laws and forces beyond our comprehension. They were wrong. Fundamentally, existentially wrong. Their very presence was an affront to the natural order, a tear in the fabric of reality. They were constructed from a material unlike anything we had ever encountered. It resembled obsidian, black and glassy, but it possessed a strange, unsettling quality that defied simple categorization. It seemed to absorb light, swallowing the already dim twilight of the valley, casting an unnatural gloom that clung to the ruins like a shroud. It was cold to the touch, unnervingly so, even in the humid jungle air, radiating a chill that seeped into our bones, a cold that felt not merely physical, but spiritual. And it was smooth, impossibly smooth, polished to a mirror sheen in some places, yet strangely textured in others, covered in subtle, unsettling patterns that seemed to shift and writhe under closer inspection. It felt alive. Not in a biological sense, but in some other, alien way, as if the very material of the ruins possessed a sentience, a consciousness that was ancient, vast, and utterly indifferent to us. The architecture of the ruins was even more disturbing than the material from which they were constructed. They were not built along Euclidean lines, not governed by the familiar laws of geometry that shape our world. The structures were curved and angular, twisting and turning in ways that defied logical perception, unsettling to the very core of our spatial understanding. Corridors stretched at impossible angles, walls leaned inward and outward with no apparent rhyme or reason, rooms opened into spaces that seemed to exist in dimensions beyond our own. It was non-Euclidean architecture made manifest, a physical embodiment of geometries that should not exist, that our minds were not equipped to process. Simply looking at the ruins induced a feeling of vertigo, of nausea, a primal sense of wrongness that resonated deep within the vestibular system, disrupting our balance, our sense of orientation, our very perception of reality. A palpable sense of wrongness, of cosmic dread, emanated from the ruins, a psychic weight that pressed down on us, making it difficult to breathe, to think clearly. The jungle sounds, which had been our constant companions for weeks, were muted here, almost entirely silenced within the valley, as if the ruins themselves were absorbing all sound, all vibration, all life. The silence was oppressive, absolute, broken only by the whisper of the wind as it snaked through the strange, black structures, a whisper that carried no comfort, no natural cadence, but sounded instead like a sigh of ancient sorrow, or a sibilant warning. It was a silence that felt not peaceful, but predatory, as if something was listening, waiting, concealed within the oppressive stillness, observing us with an unseen, unknowable gaze. Professor Armitage, inexplicably, miraculously, seemed immune to the growing terror that gripped the rest of us. Or perhaps he was simply too far gone, too consumed by his obsession to register the palpable dread that permeated the valley. He moved through the ruins with an almost manic energy, his eyes wide and feverish, his voice trembling with excitement. This, he declared, was the discovery of a lifetime, a find that would rewrite history, that would redefine our understanding of civilization, of the universe itself. He was ecstatic, euphoric, utterly oblivious to the palpable fear that gripped the rest of us, blinded by his academic fervor, his insatiable thirst for knowledge, deaf to the whispers of warning that echoed in the silence of the valley. He ordered us to set up camp at the foot of the ruins, in the least shadowed, least oppressive corner of the valley, if such a place could be said to exist. He instructed Mallory to begin surveying and mapping the site, Cartwright to collect samples of the strange black material, and myself to meticulously document every detail of the ruins, every carving, every architectural anomaly, every unsettling detail that defied rational explanation. He spoke of meticulous scientific investigation, of rigorous documentation, of unveiling the secrets of this impossible place through the power of human intellect and objective observation. He was a man possessed, driven by a force beyond reason, beyond sanity, dragging us all along with him into the heart of an ancient, unknowable horror. We set up camp reluctantly, our movements sluggish, our spirits heavy with foreboding. The valley seemed to resist our presence, the very air thick with an unspoken hostility. Even the indigenous paddlers, who had accompanied us this far, their faces etched with fear and apprehension, refused to venture closer to the ruins, setting up their own camp far down the valley, their eyes constantly fixed on the black structures looming in the mist, their voices hushed and fearful when they spoke of the place, of the ancient evil they sensed emanating from its depths. The night that followed was the longest and most terrifying of my life. Sleep was an impossibility, a distant, unattainable luxury. The oppressive silence of the valley was broken only by the unsettling whispers of the wind through the ruins, a sibilant murmur that seemed to carry words, phrases, fragments of a language not of this earth, just at the edge of hearing, always tantalizingly indistinct, yet undeniably present, weaving themselves into the fabric of the silence, a constant, maddening undercurrent of dread. And by other sounds. Faint, rhythmic pulses that seemed to resonate from deep within the earth, vibrations that crawled beneath the skin, setting teeth on edge, stirring a primal fear that resonated in the very marrow of our bones. Low, humming vibrations that seemed to emanate from the black material of the ruins themselves, a constant, low-frequency thrumming that resonated within the skull, disrupting thought, inducing nausea, blurring the edges of perception. The campfire, which had always been our source of comfort and security in the jungle nights, now seemed pathetically inadequate, a feeble flicker of light against the overwhelming darkness of the valley, offering no warmth against the unnatural cold that seeped from the ruins, providing no solace against the oppressive dread that weighed down on our souls. The shadows cast by the firelight danced and writhed against the alien structures, taking on grotesque, unsettling shapes, mocking our attempts at comfort, amplifying the sense of wrongness, of cosmic horror that permeated the valley. We huddled around the fire, our faces pale and drawn, our eyes wide and haunted, staring into the darkness beyond the flickering flames, listening to the whispers of the wind, the humming vibrations, the silence that was not silence, waiting for something. Something we could not name, something we did not understand, something ancient and malevolent that we had awakened by our intrusion into this forbidden valley. We were trespassers here, intruders in a realm not meant for human eyes, and the ruins, the valley, the very air itself seemed to be waiting to punish us for our transgression. The next day, driven by Professor Armitage's relentless will and a morbid curiosity that warred with our mounting terror, we began to explore the interior of the ruins. Stepping across the threshold of those alien structures was like crossing a boundary into another reality, a realm governed by different laws, different physics, different senses. The oppressive atmosphere of the valley intensified within the ruins, the unnatural gloom deepening, the silence becoming even more absolute, the cold seeping deeper into our bones. The obsidian-like material underfoot was strangely smooth, almost frictionless, and the non-Euclidean architecture became even more pronounced within the structures. Corridors twisted and turned at impossible angles, defying any sense of logical layout, leading us deeper and deeper into a labyrinthine maze that seemed to shift and reconfigure itself around us. Walls leaned at unsettling angles, ceilings sloped and curved in ways that defied gravity, doorways opened into rooms that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Our compasses spun wildly, useless in this warped reality. Our sense of direction became utterly disoriented, lost in the impossible geometries of the ruins. Time itself seemed to warp and distort within these black walls, stretching and compressing, losing all linear coherence. The air inside the ruins was stagnant, stale, and heavy with a faint, metallic tang, overlaid with a subtle, cloying sweetness that hinted at decay, at something ancient and corrupted/rotten. It was difficult to breathe, as if the very atmosphere was inimical to human lungs, lacking some vital element, or perhaps saturated with something else. A subtle, unseen presence that pressed in on us, suffocating us not just physically, but psychically. And then we found the carvings. They were everywhere, covering the walls, the ceilings, the floors, etched into the strange black material with an impossible precision, a meticulous detail that defied human craftsmanship. They were not hieroglyphs, not pictograms, not any form of writing or symbolic representation that we could recognize. They were patterns, complex, swirling, geometric patterns that seemed to writhe and shift before our eyes, defying fixed perception, existing in a state of constant flux. They were hypnotic, mesmerizing, disturbing in their alien complexity, hinting at concepts and realities that were utterly beyond human comprehension, beyond the grasp of our three-dimensional minds. We stared at them, fascinated and repulsed in equal measure. Professor Armitage, his eyes alight with feverish excitement, traced the impossible lines with his fingers, muttering to himself in a low, urgent voice, claiming to be deciphering their meaning, to be unlocking the secrets of the ruins, the secrets of the universe itself. He spoke of ancient knowledge, of cosmic truths, of realities beyond human understanding, his words tumbling out in a torrent of academic jargon and increasingly incoherent pronouncements. But for the rest of us, the carvings evoked not intellectual curiosity, but a primal sense of dread. As we stared at them, the initial unease intensified, morphing into a creeping, visceral terror. The patterns seemed to burrow into our minds, bypassing conscious thought, resonating directly with some primal, subconscious level of awareness. They stirred something deep within us, something ancient and atavistic, something that recognized the alien nature of these ruins, the cosmic horror they represented. We felt as if we were glimpsing something we were never meant to see, something that was actively hostile to our sanity, something that threatened to unravel the very fabric of our minds. The carvings seemed to communicate, not through language, but through something far more direct, far more insidious. They whispered to us, not with sound, but with impressions. Feelings. Emotions. A sense of vast, cold indifference, of cosmic emptiness, of unimaginable age and alien intent. They spoke of realities beyond human comprehension, of dimensions beyond human perception, of entities beyond human understanding, entities that were vast, ancient, and utterly inimical to human life. They hinted at a cosmos of unimaginable scale and indifference, a universe cold, dark, and utterly devoid of meaning, save for the silent, uncaring presence of forces beyond our grasp. The longer we stared at the carvings, the deeper we ventured into the ruins, the more profoundly we were affected. Our sense of reality began to fray, the edges of our perception blurring, the boundaries between the internal and external worlds dissolving. The nightmares, which had begun the previous night, intensified, becoming more vivid, more visceral, more inescapable. They bled into our waking hours, blurring the line between dream and reality, leaving us in a perpetual state of disorientation and dread. The dreams were filled with impossible geometries, with endless, labyrinthine corridors that shifted and twisted, defying spatial logic. They were filled with pulsating darkness, a living, breathing void that pressed in on us from all sides, threatening to swallow us whole. And they were filled with whispering voices, sibilant, murmuring voices that spoke in a language that was not language, but something that burrowed directly into the mind, bypassing the ears, planting seeds of terror in the deepest recesses of consciousness, seeds that sprouted and grew in the fertile soil of our fear-addled minds. We woke screaming, night after night, drenched in cold sweat, our hearts pounding in our chests, the lingering dread of the dreams clinging to us like a physical weight, poisoning our waking hours, eroding our sanity. Sleep offered no respite, no escape from the encroaching horror, it was merely a gateway to deeper, more terrifying realms of nightmare. One by one, the members of our expedition began to succumb, to unravel, to break under the weight of the ruins' oppressive influence. It was not disease, not accident, not any rational cause that claimed them, but something else. Something psychic, something spiritual, something that attacked not the body, but the mind, the soul. Madness, perhaps. Or something far more sinister, something ancient and alien that was actively consuming us from within. Mallory was the first to truly break. The cartographer, the meticulous mapper of the wilderness, the man of lines and angles and precise measurements, was ironically the first to lose his grip on reality within the non-Euclidean labyrinth of the ruins. He became withdrawn, silent, ceasing his meticulous work, his maps lying abandoned, his instruments untouched. He would wander through the camp with vacant eyes, staring into the mist-shrouded ruins, muttering to himself in a low, inaudible voice. He refused to speak to us, to acknowledge our presence, lost in some inner world of his own making, a world clearly shaped by the horrors of the ruins. One evening, as the unnatural twilight deepened in the valley, we found him gone. His tent was empty, his bedroll undisturbed. We searched for him, of course, but our hearts were heavy with premonition, our hopes already extinguished. We found him at the foot of the ruins, standing motionless before the black walls, his face turned upwards, his eyes wide and unseeing, fixed on some point beyond our perception. He did not respond to our calls, did not react to our touch. He stood there like a statue carved from fear, his body rigid, his breath shallow, his mind clearly absent, lost somewhere within the alien geometries of the ruins. We tried to move him, to bring him back to camp, but his limbs were stiff, unyielding, his body cold to the touch, despite the humid air. It was as if he had been, petrified, turned to stone by the very essence of the ruins. We carried him back to camp, his body unnaturally heavy, his face frozen in an expression of silent terror. He never spoke again. He remained in a catatonic state, his eyes wide and vacant, staring into nothingness, until one morning, we found him simply gone. His body withered, shrunken, inexplicably drained of life, leaving behind only an empty husk, a fragile shell of what was once a man. Cartwright followed soon after. The young zoologist, once so eager and bright-eyed, so full of enthusiasm for the wonders of the natural world, became consumed by a morbid fascination with the strange black material of the ruins. He collected samples obsessively, filling his bags with fragments of the obsidian-like substance, hoarding them like precious treasures. He would spend hours in his tent, hunched over his samples, examining them with a magnifying glass, muttering to himself about their alien properties, their unnatural textures, their unsettling energy. He claimed they were alive, sentient, that they were communicating with him, whispering secrets of the cosmos, revealing truths beyond human comprehension. His speech became increasingly erratic, his eyes alight with a manic gleam, his sanity visibly unraveling. One night, drawn by a sudden commotion, we rushed to Cartwright's tent. We found him writhing on the ground, convulsing violently, his body contorted in unnatural angles, his face a mask of unimaginable agony. He was clutching a fragment of the black material to his chest, his fingers digging into his flesh, drawing blood. He was screaming, not with his voice, but with his mind, a silent scream of pure, unadulterated terror that resonated in the air, chilling us to the bone. We tried to pry the black fragment from his grasp, but his grip was like iron, his strength unnatural, fueled by some unseen force. His convulsions intensified, his body arching and spasming, until with a final, shuddering breath, he went still. The black fragment remained clutched tightly in his hand, radiating a faint, unsettling warmth. When we finally managed to pry it loose, we found his flesh beneath burned, blackened, as if scorched by an invisible fire. Cartwright was dead, his face frozen in a rictus of silent horror, his eyes wide open, staring at some unseen abyss. And then there was Professor Armitage. His descent was the most gradual, the most insidious, and in some ways, the most terrifying to witness. Initially, he seemed to thrive in the oppressive atmosphere of the ruins, his energy levels heightened, his intellectual fervor intensified. He spent every waking hour within the black structures, poring over the carvings, filling notebooks with frantic scribbles, muttering to himself in a constant stream of academic pronouncements and increasingly incoherent ramblings. He became obsessed with deciphering the carvings, convinced that they held the key to unlocking the secrets of the ruins, the secrets of the universe itself. He spoke of ancient knowledge, of cosmic truths, of realities beyond human understanding, his eyes burning with an unsettling light, his face gaunt and feverish, his sanity slowly but surely dissolving. He neglected his food, his sleep, his personal hygiene, his entire being consumed by his obsession with the ruins. He ceased to acknowledge our presence, to recognize us as individuals, seeing us merely as obstacles or distractions in his relentless pursuit of forbidden knowledge. He spoke to the ruins themselves, to the carvings, to the silent, oppressive air of the valley, engaging in one-sided conversations in a low, urgent voice, as if communing with some unseen entity, some ancient intelligence residing within the black structures. His physical appearance deteriorated rapidly. He became gaunt, skeletal, his skin stretched taut over his bones, his eyes sunken and bloodshot, burning with a feverish, unnatural light. He moved with a jerky, erratic gait, his limbs twitching and spasming, his body seemingly animated by a force beyond his conscious control. He began to resemble not a man of science, but a gaunt, animated scarecrow, a puppet dancing to the tune of some unseen, malevolent puppeteer. One evening, as the unnatural twilight deepened, and the whispers of the wind through the ruins intensified, Professor Armitage underwent a final, terrifying transformation. He emerged from the ruins, his eyes wider than I had ever seen them, pupils dilated to black pools, reflecting the alien geometries of the carvings, burning with an unholy light. His face was contorted in a rictus of ecstatic horror, his lips drawn back in a silent scream, revealing teeth filed to sharp points, unnervingly elongated, almost inhuman. His body was convulsing, twitching, writhing in unnatural contortions, his limbs bending at impossible angles, echoing the non-Euclidean architecture of the ruins themselves. He gibbered, not in English, not in any language I recognized, but in a guttural, sibilant tongue that sounded ancient, alien, utterly abhorrent to human ears. It was the language of the ruins, the language of the carvings, the language of the entities that dwelled within. He turned his gaze upon me, and in those eyes, I saw not the professor I had known, not the man of science and reason, but something else entirely. Something ancient, something alien, something utterly devoid of humanity. There was no recognition in his gaze, no spark of human consciousness, only a cold, vast indifference, a cosmic emptiness that chilled me to the very core of my being. He was no longer Professor Armitage. He was something else. Something born of the ruins, something infused with their ancient, malevolent essence. In that moment, confronted with the transformed Professor Armitage, with that alien gaze that held no trace of humanity, I knew, with a chilling certainty that transcended reason, that there was no hope left. No hope for the expedition, no hope for my companions, and perhaps, no hope for myself. The ruins had claimed them, body and soul, and I was next. Survival was no longer a matter of scientific discovery or exploration, it was a desperate, primal struggle against an ancient, unknowable evil. Reason fled. Logic evaporated. Only instinct remained, the raw, animalistic imperative to survive, to escape, to flee from this place of cosmic horror before it consumed me entirely. I turned and ran. Blindly, desperately, without thought or plan, I fled into the green abyss, away from the camp, away from the ruins, away from the transformed Professor Armitage and the silent, watchful presence that permeated the valley. I ran as if pursued by demons, as if the very jungle itself was urging me onward, away from the heart of its darkness. Branches whipped at my face, thorns tore at my clothes, the uneven ground sent me stumbling and falling, but I did not stop. I could hear, in my mind, the sibilant whispers of the wind through the ruins, the low, humming vibrations that resonated from the black structures, the silent, alien gaze of the transformed Professor Armitage burning into my back. I ran until my lungs burned, my legs ached, my body screamed for respite, but the fear that drove me was stronger than any physical limitation. I don't know how long I ran, how far I traveled. Time had lost all meaning within the valley of the ruins, and the disorientation lingered, warping my perception of distance and duration even as I fled. Days and nights blurred into a seamless continuum of terror and exhaustion. I stumbled through the undergrowth, crawled through tangled vines, waded through murky streams, driven by a desperate, animalistic need to escape, to put as much distance as possible between myself and that place of horror. Hunger gnawed at my stomach, thirst parched my throat, exhaustion weighed down my limbs, but I dared not stop for long. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, every shadow in the periphery of my vision sent shivers of terror down my spine, fueling my desperate flight. I imagined the transformed Professor Armitage pursuing me, his inhuman eyes burning through the jungle darkness, his alien voice whispering my name on the wind, drawing me back towards the ruins, back towards my doom. Eventually, miraculously, after what felt like an eternity of flight, I stumbled back onto the river. The familiar sound of rushing water, the sight of the muddy current, was like a beacon of hope in the overwhelming darkness. I collapsed on the riverbank, delirious with exhaustion, starvation, and terror, my body trembling uncontrollably, my mind teetering on the brink of collapse. I don't know how long I lay there, unconscious or semi-conscious, drifting in and out of feverish dreams. Days later, or perhaps it was only hours, I was found by a passing riverboat, a small trading vessel making its way downriver. They found me barely alive, a gaunt, mud-caked figure huddled on the riverbank, babbling incoherently about black ruins and whispering voices, about monstrous transformations and ancient evils lurking in the heart of the jungle. They took me aboard, nursed me back to a semblance of health, listened to my ravings with a mixture of pity and skepticism. When I was finally coherent enough to tell my story, they dismissed it, of course. Put it down to fever, to sunstroke, to jungle madness, to the overactive imagination of a man pushed to the limits of endurance. They searched for the valley, for the ruins, for any sign of the expedition, but they found nothing. The maps, their maps, showed no such valley, no such ruins. The area I described was marked as uncharted territory, empty, unexplored, just as it had always been. They returned to civilization, to the world of reason and logic and maps that denied the existence of the horrors I had witnessed. I returned with them, a broken man, haunted by memories that no one else believed, burdened by a terror that no one else understood. My story was dismissed as delirium, my experiences relegated to the realm of fevered dreams and jungle hallucinations. There was no official record of the Armitage expedition, no trace of our ill-fated journey into the green hell. It was as if we had never existed, as if the jungle had swallowed us whole, erasing us from history, concealing the terrible secrets we had stumbled upon. But I know what I saw. I know what I experienced. And the nightmares still come. They are not mere dreams, they are vivid, visceral replays of the horrors I endured, etched into my mind with a searing intensity that time cannot diminish. The impossible geometries of the ruins, the pulsating darkness that seemed to breathe and writhe, the whispering voices that spoke in a language beyond human comprehension, they are all still there, lurking in the shadows of my mind, indelible, inescapable. Sometimes, in the dead of night, when the silence is heavy and oppressive, when the wind whispers through the trees outside my window, mimicking the sibilant murmur of the valley, I hear them again. The faint, rhythmic pulses that resonate from deep within the earth. The low, humming vibrations that crawl beneath the skin. And I wonder, are they still there, in that hidden valley, waiting? listening? Or have they followed me back? Have they taken root not just in my mind, but in this world, in this reality, forever bound to the echoes in the uncharted wilds, waiting to be awakened again, to claim new victims, to spread their ancient, cosmic horror to a world utterly unprepared for their return? I fear, with a chilling certainty that chills me to the bone, that the green hell holds secrets that were never meant to be unearthed, and that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. And sometimes, in the deepest, darkest hours of the night, I hear them whisper my name.